My father grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave bruises at my brother Mason's graduation dinner, in front of 58 people at a restaurant in downtown Denver, because I refused to give him my house. That is the sentence I have repeated to myself every morning for the past 7 months. Not as punishment, but as a reminder. Because for 31 years, I had been extraordinarily good at softening sentences, exactly like that one, into something easier to live with. My name is Fiona Brennan. I am 31 years old. I have a CPA license, a mortgage I have never missed a payment on, and a 3-bedroom craftsman bungalow in Denver's Washington Park neighborhood that I purchased with money I earned over 8 years without a single dollar of help from my family. That house, 4 blocks from the park, original hardwood floors, a backyard I spent 2 summers landscaping myself, is the thing I am most proud of in this world. It is also the thing my parents decided belonged to my brother. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment and tell me where you are from. Hit like and subscribe, and let me take you through the night that changed everything. Growing up in suburban Denver, Mason and I were raised in the same house, by the same 2 parents, under the same roof. But we did not grow up in the same family. That is the only honest way I know how to say it. My parents are not cruel people by any simple definition. They kept the lights on. They put food on the table. But there was always a kind of unspoken accounting happening in our house. A ledger where every resource, every dollar, every hour of attention and encouragement ran through my brother first and reached me only if something remained. Mason is 3 years younger than me and the only son. I understood from a fairly young age what that meant. My father used the phrase carrying on the family name, without any irony, well into this century. My mother translated every one of my accomplishments into a question about my future marriage. When I made honor roll junior year, she asked if I was leaving enough time to meet people. When I got into the accounting program at CU Boulder, she said, "That's wonderful, but Mason's looking at schools too, and will need to see how the finances shake out." They paid for Mason's first 2 years of college, not mine. I applied for every scholarship available to me, worked 20 hours a week at the campus library, and graduated with $62,000 in student loans that I have been paying down systematically ever since. I did not complain about this. I told myself it was fine. I had become very skilled at telling myself things were fine. When Mason dropped out after his sophomore year to figure himself out, my parents called it a brave and self-aware decision. When he spent 3 years cycling through restaurant work, freelance graphic designs, and a brief experiment with real estate, they called it finding his path. When he finally enrolled in an MBA program at 30, his tuition, partially funded by my parents, who explained to me that they had saved up specifically for this. They threw him a celebration dinner and invited everyone they knew. I was invited to that dinner. I should have thought more carefully about going. I want to be honest. I did not walk into that restaurant expecting a confrontation. I genuinely wanted to celebrate my brother. We were not close, Mason and I, but we were cordial. Holiday calls, birthday texts. The polite maintenance of a relationship that had never been allowed to develop into anything real because the family dynamic made authenticity too expensive. I wanted that to change. I kept thinking the right event, the right moment, would be the one where we finally got there. My best friend Tamsin came with me. She has known my family long enough to know when backup is useful. "Text me if you need an out," she said in the Uber on the way over. "It's just dinner," I told her. Mason had also proposed to Tara's, his girlfriend of 2 years, about 3 weeks before the dinner. Tara is a second-grade teacher, patient, genuinely warm, the kind of person who remembers what you told her about yourself months later and asks about it. I liked her immediately. I was glad Mason had found someone steady. The restaurant had a private back room. My parents had reserved it for the full party, 58 people, a mix of extended family, my parents' friends, Mason's business school classmates, and some of Tara's family who had driven up from Colorado Springs. There were centerpieces, a slideshow, printed menus. The whispers started during cocktail hour. Not anything I could hear clearly. Just a specific frequency of conversation that shifts when someone in the room is the topic. I watched my father lean toward my uncle near the bar. I watched my mother gesture toward me while talking to my great-aunt in the corner. I saw cousins glance in my direction in that careful way people do when they have just been told something about you. Tamsin squeezed my arm under the table during the salad course. I shrugged. We would get through dinner. Then my father stood up for the toast. He is a good public speaker. He always has been. He knows how to hold a room, how to use a pause, how to make a sentence arrive with weight. He started the way these things usually start, with stories about Mason as a boy and expressions of parental pride, and a joke that made the room laugh on cue. Then he said, Mason and Tara are beginning something truly beautiful together. And as parents, your mother and I want to make sure they have the foundation they deserve. He turned, and his gaze settled on me like a spotlight going on without warning. We're grateful that our family takes care of its own. Fiona has a beautiful home in Wash Park. 3 bedrooms, more space than one person needs. And we know she understands that her brother and his soon-to-be wife need that kind of start. We're proud to announce that this home will be their wedding gift. The room went still. 58 people looked at me. I did not move. I sat completely still while my face went hot, and my brain attempted to process what my father had actually just said, out loud in public, to an audience of everyone we knew. He had not asked me. He had not mentioned it to me. He had simply announced it. The way you announce a thing that has already been decided, a thing that is already done. Tamsin's hand found my knee under the table and pressed down hard. Mason was staring at the tablecloth. Tara's face had gone very still. My mother was smiling. I picked up my water glass. I set it back down. I looked at my father and I said, clearly enough for the nearest 4 tables to hear, that isn't accurate. I never agreed to any of that. What followed was about 30 seconds of the most uncomfortable silence I have ever sat inside. Then conversation restarted in pieces. Artificial, the way it does when a room collectively decides to move past something. Nobody knows how to address. My father sat down. My mother leaned toward him. Someone at the far end of the table laughed too loudly at something. My Aunt Claudia, my father's older sister, appeared at my shoulder 20 minutes later. She is a woman who does not traffic in softness when the situation does not call for it. Are you all right? She asked. Not particularly, I said. What he did was not all right. Before either of us could say more, my mother was at my elbow. Fiona, can we speak privately for a moment? It was not a question. And I, 31 years old, financially independent, fully capable of saying no, followed her anyway, because 31 years of conditioning does not dissolve in an evening. We walked through the restaurant to a short hallway near the restrooms. My father was already there waiting. You embarrassed yourself out there, he said before I had finished turning around. I corrected a false statement you made about my property, I said. Your property. My mother said it the way people repeat a word they find faintly ridiculous. Yes, my property, the house I bought, the mortgage I pay. Mason and Tara can't afford anything in this market, my father said. You know that. Then they rent while they save. That's what I did. For years. That's different. Tell me specifically how. My mother stepped closer. Her voice went soft, the particular softness she uses when she wants something. Because you've always been the strong one, the independent one. You don't need what Mason needs. You never did. I had been told some version of this my entire life, packaged as a compliment, that my self-sufficiency made me expendable, that my ability to manage on my own somehow forfeited my right to what I had built, that my competence was the justification for my deprivation. My house is not available, I said. Not as a gift, not as a loan, not in any form. This conversation is finished. I turned to walk back to the dining room. My father grabbed my wrist. Not a touch. A grip, his fingers closing hard around my wrist, yanking me back so sharply that I stumbled a half step toward him. You don't walk away from this discussion, he said. His voice was quiet, which somehow made it worse. I looked down at his hand on my arm. I looked up at his face. Something went very still inside me, not blank, still. The way water goes still before it changes state. I said at full carrying volume, let go of me, right now. He did not. He is grabbing me, I said, louder, toward the hallway entrance where the dining room was visible. Someone come here, please. My Aunt Claudia was already moving. A server appeared in the doorway. Two people near the corridor entrance stood up from their seats. My father released my wrist. I walked back into the dining room. My wrist had already begun to throb. Tamsin was on her feet before I reached the table. I said, quietly, "I need you to see this." I took out my phone. Standing at the edge of the private dining room, with the better part of 50 people watching, I photographed my wrist from 4 angles. The redness was already a visible band across the inside of my wrist. By the following morning, it would be 4 distinct finger-shaped bruises in shades of purple and green. Then I called 911. I want to be honest about what that felt like. There was a version of me, the version I had been my entire life, screaming internally that this was too much, that you do not do this to family. That people would think I was being dramatic, punitive, impossible. I heard every one of those voices clearly and completely. I let them speak their piece. And then I told the operator that my father had grabbed and physically restrained me against my will at a restaurant, and that I needed someone to come. The restaurant manager had also called. 2 officers arrived in under 10 minutes. My father received a citation for misdemeanor assault. He was asked to leave the premises. He walked past me on the way out and did not look at me. My mother did. Her expression was something I had never seen on her face before. A combination of fury and genuine disbelief, as though I had done something incomprehensible. As though the incomprehensible thing was not his hand on my wrist but my response to it. Mason never moved from his chair, not once through any of it. He sat beside Tara, who had her hand pressed over her mouth, and he looked at the tablecloth. He did not stand up. He did not come find me. He did not say a single word in my direction. I stayed long enough to give my full statement to the officer. Tamsin sat beside me the entire time. My Aunt Claudia gave her account of what she had witnessed. When it was over, I walked out into the cold Denver air and finally, for the first time in several hours, breathed. The texts were already coming in before I reached the parking lot. My mother. This is unforgivable. You just destroyed this family over a house. Mason. I don't even know who you are. This was supposed to be my night. Tara. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I promise you I didn't know. My Aunt Claudia. You did the right thing. Call me tomorrow. Tamsin drove me home. I sat in her passenger seat with an ice pack the restaurant manager had pressed into my hands on the way out. And I did not cry until we merged onto I-25. And then I cried until we pulled up in front of my house. And then I stopped. I pressed my forehead against the cold window glass and looked at the porch light I had left on. The porch I had scraped down to bare wood and repainted myself, a particular shade of green I had chosen without consulting a single person. I thought, this is mine. Every coat of paint, every mortgage payment, every 6 a.m. alarm and skipped vacation and year of packing lunches instead of buying them. I thought, no one is taking it. The bruise developed over the next 24 hours into something unmistakable. 4 finger-shaped marks, clear as a photograph, on the inside of my left wrist. I shot it again in natural light the following morning and emailed the images to the detective's address, along with a written account of the evening in my own words. I was informed in writing that the case would proceed. My therapist fit me in on an emergency basis the next morning. I sat across from her and told her everything, and she listened the way she always does, without moving to fix it before I was finished. "How are you feeling?" she asked when I was done. "Like something cracked open," I said, but not in the way that means falling apart. More like fresh air coming in. She nodded. "Tell me more about that." I had spent so many years being the one who held things steady. Who showed up, who gave the toast, who sent the birthday texts, who absorbed the casual diminishments as the understood price of keeping a family in one piece. That I had stopped calculating what it was costing me. The answer, it turned out, was more than I had ever been told I was allowed to charge. I blocked my parents' numbers for 30 days. Not as punishment, but because I needed to be able to think without their signal drowning everything out. My Aunt Claudia and I had lunch the following week. She ordered a glass of wine and said the things you only hear when someone in your family finally breaks a pattern she has been watching for decades. "Your parents love you," she said, "but they love the version of you that has no needs. That version is simpler for them." "I know," I said. You don't owe them that version. I had heard variations of this before, but hearing it from someone who had watched my family up close, who had sat in those rooms, who shared its history, it landed somewhere different, somewhere it had not landed before. Work was the most stable thing during those weeks. My manager Lorraine, who has been in corporate accounting for 25 years, and has approximately 0 patience for unexamined drama, stopped by my desk on my first day back. "You okay?" she asked. "Family situation," I said. "It's being handled." She looked at me for a beat. "Take whatever time you need and come back right. If that means another week, take it." I stayed. Having something external and concrete to be competent at was, honestly, what I needed. The assault case concluded with a fine and mandatory anger management classes. I received written confirmation. I did not celebrate, but I exhaled, fully, for what felt like the first time. It mattered that there was a record somewhere outside my own memory. It mattered that the narrative could not be rewritten the way my mother had already begun rewriting it in calls to other relatives. The version where I had been provocative, where I had staged a scene for dramatic purposes, where my father's hand on my wrist was a reasonable response to an unreasonable daughter. Several cousins texted to ask what had actually happened. I sent them the photographs. Not out of revenge, but because I was done with the family architecture where whoever controls the story controls the truth, and I had evidence of my own. I refinished my front porch steps in October, planted a small vegetable garden along the south-facing fence. Had my neighbor Daphne over for dinner. She had moved in down the street 6 months earlier, and I had been meaning to introduce myself since spring. We ended up talking until almost midnight on my back porch. Under the string lights I had hung myself, surrounded by the particular quiet that a neighborhood gets after 10 on a weeknight. She had grown up in a family with a similar accounting system, a favored sibling. Parents who mistook control for love, a long and nonlinear process of understanding that leaving a table can be the most adult decision available. We talked about that. We refilled our glasses. At some point I looked around at my backyard and thought, I built this, every part of it, and no one helped me, and no one can take it, and that is its own kind of belonging. 5 months after the graduation dinner, Mason called from Tara's phone. I almost didn't pick up. "She said you might not answer from mine," he said. His voice was quieter than I was used to. Older, somehow. She was right. He told me that he and Tara had started couples counseling, that their counselor had asked him to make a list of things he needed to take responsibility for. "You were on the list," he said. I did not say anything. I waited. "I sat there while he grabbed you," he said. I didn't move. I've been telling myself it was because I froze, and that's partly true. But I've been honest in therapy about the other part, which is that I've spent my whole life assuming you didn't need anyone to step in because you're always fine, because you handle it. He paused. "That wasn't fair to you. I'm sorry." It was the most honest thing he had ever said to me, and it did something to me that was not quite relief and not quite grief, but something in between. A loosening of something I had not realized I was still holding. "My position with Mom and Dad hasn't changed," I said carefully. "I'm not there. I might not get there." "I understand. And the house is mine." "I know," he said. "It always was. I want you to know." I didn't know they planned to announce it. I was blindsided. That doesn't excuse me not saying anything afterward, but I want you to know the announcement itself wasn't something I asked for. We talked for nearly an hour. Not about reconciliation, exactly. Something more provisional and more honest than that. The possibility of a different relationship. One that did not require either of us to perform a version of ourselves, designed to keep our parents comfortable. When I hung up, I sat in my living room in the quiet of a weeknight, the hardwood floors catching the lamplight the way they do in winter when the sun sets early, and I let myself feel all of it at once. The grief for the family I had deserved and never been given, the unexpected lightness of no longer auditioning for a role that was never going to be offered to me anyway, and the small, real tentative thing that might become an actual relationship with my brother, if we were both willing to do the work honestly. 7 months later, I still live in my Washington Park bungalow. The photographs of my wrist are still on my phone, in a folder I do not open often but know is there. Having a record of your own experience matters when the people who hurt you are skilled at convincing you and everyone around you that it happened differently than it did. My parents and I are estranged. That word used to feel like a catastrophe, like failure, like a door slamming on something irreplaceable. Now it feels more like a boundary with a name, a fact about where things stand, not a verdict on who I am. If you take anything from this, documenting what happens to you is not overreacting. Calling for help when someone physically hurts you. Even if that person is your father, even if you are at a family event, even if the room is full of people who love him, is not a betrayal. It is the first step in being honest about what your life actually is, versus what you have been told it should look like from the outside. Refusing to give your home to someone who already has everything is not selfish. Setting a limit is not starting a fight. And the table you leave is not always the one you regret walking away from. If any part of this story felt familiar to you, you are not alone in it. Leave a comment and tell me where you are watching from. I read every single one. Like this video if it meant something to you, and subscribe so you are here for what comes next. There is more to tell, and I want you with me for it.